No.
Get it set up, so it's like, yeah, we'll do that on the weekends. Oh, it's this one.
I haven't seen this one yet.
Really?
Yeah. How many times have you seen it?
Too many. I think this will be the third or fourth.
I saw one case. I think it was
Just let me go, or just let me know when you guys are good for that.
I'm good.
You all good?
I am.
Alright, quiet on the set.
Contention 1 is deportation, collateral consequences are deportation on top of numerous other convictions by Junction 23. Collateral consequences are increasingly common near every conviction subject to conflict to a network of restrictions that substantially affect a life not harmfully. Part of punishment of the U.S. has a debilitating web consequence. Individuals may lose the right to remain in countries. The effects not just limited to deportees, but also extend to the families, causing mental and physical issues by teenagers. Donate 24. Stress of parents, deportation, including fear, anxiety, self-blame, helplessness, sadness, no longer want to live there, it seems very low. Children required more withdrawn, may notice depression, affective concentration, and effort to raise grades immediately. Also, departure threatens stability and causes chaos. Children fed pressure to start working. Fictional police solve removal offense or replaced with low-level offenses that prevent deportation by Junction 23. Removal offenses rise, drug conviction trigger, removal, prosecutor, minimize removal, Baltimore's attorney amounts to utilize discretion, avoid immigration consequences, issue guidelines for the mitigation broadly sized video, frequently employ standing charges to replace the charges of solicitation, misprision, or go-to. Widely advise attorneys to get creative. Plea bargaining expands defendant freedom and sentencing gap. This makes the choice coerced. Young 23. Coercion is about the quantity of influence rather than the influence on the choice wrongfully interferes with freedom. We might realize coercive situations denies a person often given the rights hard dealing jobs in punishment between the threat and the offer supposed to threat, nor the offer was fair with the gap between the wise enough not dealing not hard dealing, rather fear that is unjust. Defendant imagine defendant facing a stiff sentence who accepts a slap on the wrist will not say that defendant was coerced, offering is equivalent to threatening not change. Options available not fetishize over. Defendant autonomy confuses objectionable cases for the injustice of institutions. Plea bargaining is agreed by U.S. courts, including the Supreme Court, viewing it as an essential component of administration of justice. Grossman 22. In practice, could recognize the Supreme Court as essential court justice issued landmark ruling affirming the constitutionality of plea bargaining upheld it as necessary to manage court and efficiently. None of the terms are intrinsic. Coercion is a product of justice system, not plea bargaining. Bell 23. Coercion is not generated by plea bargaining. It arises when judge denies pretrial release or commands the defendant to appear in court. A judge imposes a lengthy prison term upon conviction that coercion exists with or without plea bargaining. Proportionality is no violation. Short 23. Plea bargaining necessitates sacrifice of proportionality is wrongly. Critic is flawed. Unilateral reduction of how critics conceive plea bargaining is which state lends the punishment for the unguided plea bargaining. It's not multilateral. The state gives up the diminishment in exchange for the confession offered by the defendant. In the United States criminal justice system, fictional plea bargaining is just in the instance of adverse immigration consequences. Contention 2 is framing the meta ethics, naturalistic, moral realism. 1 converges to scientific method is the only rule, the only tool to evaluate objective evidence, non-naturalist collapse skepticism. 24. In moral facts, scientific, then we have attained knowledge. Moral naturalist answer the skeptic. The explanation of challenge beliefs are explained by psychological attitudes. Evolutionary debunking our moral beliefs are explained by evolutionary pressure. Explanation tangled naturalistic factors. The explanation challenge makes strong case. For skeptics, the naturalists have an easy way to answer moral beliefs are explained by naturalist facts. Those natural facts are moral facts. Those compelling response to many advocates are explanation to challenge. Challenge for non-naturalists are non-naturalists. 2 causal closure thesis, non-natural moral facts, and make an observable difference. Copy now 20. Any non-naturalist view faces difficulties of all the physical effects are due to natural causes and moral facts. Allow sides that moral facts can never make a difference. And knowledge is mediated by physical process facts and not influence the physical world. Hard to have any knowledge of them. Next, phenomenal introspection is a reliable process for beliefs that concludes the intrinsic value of pain and pleasure. Revulsion neuroscience proves. Nelson 20. Feelings are part of the process. We know that pleasure or pain. Knowledge of hedonistic conscious pinch yourself. You become aware through phenomenology, detecting that pleasures of all feeling. Pleasure and pains are phenomenological states. The only way to explain what makes a trait virtue is by appealing to the trait's good outcome. Drive for 3. When he asks why is X a virtue, we not respond saying X displays good intention. We point to the external facts when consequences are actually produced by the trait of virtue is a character that systemically produces a preponderance of good, decidedly inconsequential since it looks at goodness and consequences. Standard is maximize expected well-being, impact how consequences first. 1 known to foresight for distinction for states. Enoch 7. Choose among the foreseen consequences of evade responsibility. State action to global perspective must be undertaken. Governance no special relationship, more consequence responsibility. 2. No activation distinction. States have to say yes or no to bill, which means omitting exact now is an action back to takes all calculations and states can only calculate 3 self-reflexivity beyonding in Miller 19. Research to understand why past research has gone around and improve on rectifying problems, make a better prediction to protect something is verifiable, better evidence of models, represent reality of permissibility and presumption affirm. A freeze, otherwise we would not be able to justify morally true actions. There isn't a prohibition. We have the proven obligation to be affirming harder. 746 rebuttal skill 1 C uplearning generic tasks using dark empirics proof. Shot 21. Over 243 bit tournaments, negative 152% device. Structural not topic specific analysis includes 18 topics after accounting for all advantage negating the issue. Fairness is proven to ensure efficacy and reduce burnout, and it's intrinsic to playing of competitive games. Balance 19. Research argues that fairness is key in burnout uncertainty, making it more difficult for academics to reach a goal. Stress likely unfairness positively associated with burnout when perceived as fairness. Absent academic experiences, less control as a result of frustration, not from having a voice. Debate does not reorient our politics. Having a fair voluntary discussion vote in November 23. Evidence that arguments not change minds. People become more convinced of their prior views. Arguments look like games where people score points rather than improving. People to avoid revising their views about beliefs, ignore the evidence, or describe the paradigms or discounter evidence. Argumentation is a means to cement identities gravitate towards epistemic involvement and reinforce beliefs to be more extreme versions. Argumentation flow in both directions. Engage with arguments, receive will engage with argumentation, block and revising beliefs. Epistemic exchanges done on the basis of reciprocity and fairness must emerge. In the suitable relationship must emerge. In saturated environments, no one must make decisions regarding whom to engage with. Exchange requires a common ground. If exchange fails, then argumentation will not change of mind. Microaggression research proves that using the ballot failed and is violent. Lewin 17. Proof falls squarely on the advocates to demonstrate the social bear the weight of the unintentional aggression. Just oxymoronic aggressive acts are by definition intent. There's no evidence that microaggression is correlated with prejudice. The meta-analytic evidence suggests that pressure not to be non-prejudiced, hiding their prejudice to correct students in a heavy-handed fashion, boosting the risk of backfire efforts. Lower the threshold of what is hostile, generating false positive, exacerbating racial tension. Clients who become receive pressure, breathing up PTSD times more, and become more open to teachers. Data reveal non-significant trends. Comparing opportunity costs is best for argument or finding fair class 18. An adequate framework must include comparison and evaluation of different arguments. Deliberation contribute to ethical critique by ensuring that arguments are considered and theorized. People have to moderate their own partialities. Argumentation over what policy should be adopted to exclude other analysis such as representation, but subsumes that the framework provides an effective way of evaluating discourse within a deliberative procedure for partiality to filter out conclusion would not pass a questioning proposal. That's in the light of consequences. The most perspective consequentialist framework can accommodate ethical issues within consequentialist perspective. Different cross.
All right. Without saying pleasure is good because pleasure is good, explain why pleasure should be the guidance of our ethics.
Because people are motivated by pleasure, i.e. our Nelson card highlights specifically from neurological brain studies.
Why is that good? Why is that good to be motivated by pleasure?
It's good because our argument is just that people are motivated by pleasure.
How does this escape egoism? I only care about my pleasure. Why would I not just chase only my pleasure?
Because states must calculate, i.e. the state must care about everyone in...
Okay, so I guess if a serial killer only gained pleasure from killing people, and that serial killer wanted, like, why does that serial killer care about other people's pain?
Our argument is that governments must aggregate specifically about... Yeah.
Okay, why do governments actually... Should the government sacrifice our freedom of speech to stop a thing like killing a single person?
Like in what? Like...
That's the
what?
What's worse, the government's taking away my freedom of speech or the government killing one person?
The government killing someone?
So the government taking away the entire state's freedom of speech is not worse.
I think killing someone would also take away the right to speech.
The entire 3 million people in the United States freedom of speech gone is not worse than a single death.
Okay, this is a hypothetical, man. This would never happen. And you know death is worse.
Okay, great. Does extinction or any pain impact outweigh any form of oppression?
We don't read an extinction.
Is death the ultimate impact under util?
I guess, but we would also use a probability times magnitude lens.
Okay, great. So 0.01% chance times infinite magnitude of extinction. How does that work?
We would say use a tail discounted measure. We would not do 0.001, but use a probability times magnitude, i.e. high probability times magnitude. Just like exactly, just evidence, man.
Okay, great. Are there any a priori reasons to affirm or negate?
The AFF.
The AFF. Is there any indexical-esque argument?
Nope.
Okay. Great. When you drink water, isn't it because you're thirsty?
Wait, if I drink water, is it because what?
Isn't it because you're thirsty?
Yeah, I guess.
How do you imagine the AFF, by the way? How do you get to the AFF's world?
The AFF's world is status quo.
How do you, the AFF's world is the status quo?
Yeah.
How do you see a world without, like, the other forms of plea bargaining?
What do you mean other forms? Our argument is that we're not getting to just fictional plea bargaining.
Okay.
Fictional plea bargaining has a subset and status quo is just.
Fictional plea okay. Great. Do you garner any offense that is unconsequential?
Yeah.
Yes, what is it?
Comp preempts.
Comp preempts?
Yeah.
And, okay. Great. So, I got something. And then, can you explain to me why prioritizing a death impact over an oppression impact, or what would come first under util?
Probability times magnitude weighing.
Probability times, but you can't like actually do the math.
You could, i.e. extinction would not outweigh because it has very low probability. I'll give you statistics if you need.
Setting the negative.
How many off?
3 off in case. Or no case framer first.
me change the name of the city. I'll just like writing crap while I fix the saving issue. Save as Alright, there we go. Speech accent. That was 20 seconds of prep. 340 remaining.
Just let me down.
Yep, go.
Columbia.
Alright. Is anybody not ready?
I haven't gotten it yet.
Alright.
Oh, I forgot it's not email. I'm stupid. Never mind. I'm good.
Like, how did you not get it yet, man?
I'm sorry.
Alrighty. I'll begin on my first word.
Thank you.
Interpretation of the affirmative must defend that resolved in the United States criminal justice system, plea bargaining is just as a value statement. To clarify, no affiat is just can never imply action. Kramer 23. That's different from normally verbs, which are usually action words. A linking verb describes the relationship between the subject of a sentence and an adjective. Is just as copular, not module. No action is prescribed because immorality is equality without condition. English grammar 10. Copular verb used to join noun complement to a subject expresses that the subject has the property denoted by its complement. Peter is British, assigns the quality of Britishness to Peter. And violation, they use fiat. Any plan that excludes forms of plea bargaining or defends something that would shift from the status quo uses fiat. In order to imagine this world, they must fiat a comparative world. The idea here is that we live in a world where all forms of plea bargaining exist. They are affirming only a world in which fictional pleas exist. The only way for them to get to this world is to feel a world in which that is the fact, and then they can look at that world and analyze it. Anything else means they haven't done a comparative worlds analysis, which means their util aff fails. Now, standards. 1. Precision. The resolution is a constitutive rule of debate, which means the judge can't vote on any aff that doesn't affirm it. And 2. Limits. A. Predictability. Lacks of consensus on what constitutes topical aff means that there are functionally an infinite amount of affs that can only marginally relate to the plea bargain. B. Bidirectionality. Their model green eggs defending either the status quo or plea bargain reform, which means the NEG has to defend both sides of debate. That creates impossible preparation and makes negating impossible. Off the dog. Don't let them go for the argument that defending subsets is more in depth. First of all, the point is I couldn't predict it. If I can't predict it, then we can't have in-depth debate. If we can't have in-depth debate, then you cannot access your in-depth. It's not predictable because there's infinite affs, so you could choose any definition of any word or just do any form of reform. Now, on the shell, next off. Interpretation of the affirmative may not defend a subset of plea bargaining. Plea bargaining is an abstract noun which requires a generic reading. Hull 10. Concerning moral sentences, murder is wrong. Abstract noun. We have a generic master from generic. Violation, they defend. Fictional plea standards. 1. Precision. The resolution is a constitutive rule of debate, which means the judge can't vote on any aff that doesn't affirm it. And 2. Limits are an infinite amount of tiny affs that focus on specific crimes, which creates an impossible preparative for the NEG and gives the aff a massive structural advantage, which kills fairness. Floaters. Cross-play the 1AC's commitment to fairness and drop the debater. 1. To deter future abuse. 2. If I prove abuse, it means substance already been skewed. No RBS. 1. Debaters don't just win for being fair or educational. 2. It would encourage good theory debaters to be abusive so they can bait theory and one up an RBI. And 3. It would discourage people from checking abuse because they're afraid of a good prep out. And competing interests. 1. Reasonability is arbitrary and requires gender intervention. 2. It encourages getting as close to the bright line as possible. And now, next off. The role of the ballot swap by the debater who links to the strongest contention level office, the winning action guiding ethical perimeter, prefer one constitutionalism. This is the way the event with that is distinct from other events, i.e. why we affirm some unique benefits to other role ballots because we can get them policy better outside the round 2. Regus, we can implement yes why we should care about any voter. Only normal philosophy can answer this question since it rigorously justify what we ought to do. That means I hijack every other voting issue since only my model explains on that matter. And 3. Motivation normative frameworks are key to motivating people to take actions. Only by empirically justifying actions are people motivated to follow them. That outweighs. You can't access the benefits of your model if nobody bothers following it in the first place. And presumption negates. 1. We presume things false. This is why people do not believe in things like conspiracy theories. 2. There are infinite number of ways to prove something false and only one way to prove it true. And 3. The NEG burden is denied the evidence of truth. There's no evidence as to why the resolution is true. The NEG is their burden. And permissibility negates. 1. The aff must prove plea bargaining is just not that plea bargaining is permissible. 2. Obligation arguments don't apply to this topic. Meaning arguments like the obligation to drink water don't apply to topics without the word ought. And 3. Any argument that creates a contradiction negates like trivialism and indexicals. Infinite worlds means no weighing. And the metaethic is moral anti-realism. The view that objective moral values don't exist. Prefer Joyce 20. There is no consideration. Moral views, more discriminants are characterized by unusual degree of objectability. The best explanation that judges reflect different ways of life. This is a better explanation than the realm of objective moral facts, which unquestioned inferior epistemic acts. And also proven by Joyce 21. When we make public moral judgment, we are sitting the active in question initiates a certain property moral wrongness. When we make a moral judgment, we are expressing feelings. Moral judgment really valid commensurate true meaning should be captured using the imperative mood. Moral disagreements are a clash of emotional attitudes rather than a clash of beliefs. And 2. Asserting that some property has intrinsic ethical value is circular. Picked in 21. For any X of good men, X things are good. Tautology equivalent to X things are X are good things are good. And off the dock. This is a clear takeout to utilitarian calculus says pleasure is good because it's good. If they can't access non-natural facts, they can't do critical thinking beyond the experience of pleasure being good, which means they can't solve the open questions argument. Now, only contracts in terms of ethics, people can create contingent obligations. They agree in general to their desires, and in doing so, establish a set of moral agreements. Sarverson 25. Right and wrong don't fall out of scale. The principles and morals are a set of agreement. I agree to a certain thing for you, provided you do something for me. Our coming to an agreement involves a conditional intention. I'll do X if you do Y, you'll do Y if I do X. Your agreement would have created an obligation for you. And thus the standard is consistency with contracts. Prefer one motivation. Contracts are only motivational ethical theory. I can decide not to be utilitarian whenever I feel like and be better off, but I can't do it with the contracts. The reason I feel obligated to fulfill my end is I'll know I'll get something in return. That always morality can't provide obligation if it's not motivational. Say you ought to do something means you have some reason to act a certain way, which isn't the case if you can just ignore ethics. Also, Crossix is damning on this. They didn't explain to you why a person would care about another person. If the government gains infinite pleasure from killing people or from farming organs to gain things, they would still do it. They say it's only about the government, but they haven't proved why the government should care about my pain or my pleasure, which means that the government's going to be fully self-interested and doesn't care about me. 2. Binding is every other procedure collapses. Different people have different conceptions of what the correct action is under utilitarianism, conscientism, etc. The only way we clearly line out what you're actually obligated to do is by explicitly binding you to certain rules. Otherwise, you could be utilitarian and believe pleasure results from robbery, which doesn't do you much. And 3. Action-specific. States lack wills, which they aren't moral agents. Rather, states only gain authority power by making contracts, e.g. the Constitution. This means that states are uniquely obligated to follow contracts, as this is the basis for their existence. This takes out intent, foresight, distinction, and active omission because they must start a contract before you can even make those arguments about the government. And 4. Reject consequentialism. A. Induction fails. There's no logical certainty what's happened before will happen again. Responses are circular because they claim that induction working before means that it'll work again. B. Every action causes infinite cascading consequences, and codes are arbitrary, which makes calculation impossible. C. Consequences can only tell if an action was good or not after it was taken, which means the judge can't evaluate the ethicality. And then C and D. They must prove predictions should be the basis of ethics. Also, off the dock real quick. They haven't provided why predictions should be the basis of ethics, but second of all, they haven't provided into which prediction. They say predictions are getting better, but it doesn't prove they are possible. It still proves that predictions are unpredictable and shouldn't be used for ethics. And D. Empirics prove people are terrible at making predictions. Make them provide counter statistics. Monado 5. By the end of the study, experts have made 82,361 forecasts. Experts were worse if they simply cited equal probability of all outcomes. More than 100 studies have pitted experts against formulas, and almost all these studies people either do no better or do worse. And I negate the resolution. 1. Plea bargains are untransparent, prohibition on judicial participation, non-disclosure, incentives, deceive the court, violate the 6th and First Amendment. That outweighs A. Scope only to individuals consent to a plea bargain, but the Constitution obligation shared by all individuals. B. All legal authorities derived by the Constitution, like a prior question resolving any other contract. And C. It's a functional check on contracts which are legitimate. Transparency helps the public condemn unjust contracts. And D. To their comp preempts. Judges agreeing the extension of broken contracts is bad, and we should escape contracts that are broken. Charter 21. Plea bargaining remains informal and obscure. Judges are especially prohibited from participating. Offers are not publicly announced or reduced writing. Even when a plea agreement is disclosed, it does not provide adequate transparency. It may not contain the full terms of the bargain, especially if parties are attempting to conceal. AU does not provide a justification of the terms negotiated. Parties have every incentive to keep from the court facts that may not disturb the agreement, and the lack of transparency contracts sharply the legal commitment. The 6th Amendment provides right to a public trial, a fundamental right because transparent ensures fair treatment and effective restraint on abuse of judicial power. First Amendment rights to free speech and free press freezes right to information about the government, including criminal proceedings. We'll skip the second contention now. Freeze is false on presumption and permissibility. Affirm when I'm thirsty, I drink water. It's an obligation. Affirming is harder is not a reason you should get it. 2. 1. It doesn't prove how you solve this problem. And 2. It's just a reason. That is not the reason why affirming is harder. 3. Reject these argument. It kills maybe we don't know how to adjust. Every argument starts false. 1. Your argument is unverifiable. 2 to 3 point takes out this out. And negation 3 is false. 1. My brother doesn't prove the AFF is not a good idea. Permissibly happens and proves the AFF is false. I.e. you means you couldn't improve the justice system. True, so it's false. And 3. Your brother doesn't prove the justice system. And 4. No warrant why this flips presumption principle on framing proper national products are inaccessible. The argument that we pleasure is false. Different amounts of pleasure, infinite trade-offs, and calculation impossible. The alternative is non-natural facts. Your argument also A spec false neg. The government must respect rights first, and if there's any examples that flow, they flow neg more than a way to prove something false than one to prove it true.
You go for cross.
Yeah.
Is contracts consequentialist?
No.
Why do I join a contract?
Because you want something.
Okay, why do I want something, and what is that something I want?
I don't know what that something you want is, but I don't want to die, so I joined a contract in the United States.
We don't want to die, so we foresee ourselves dying.
I actually don't foresee myself dying. I used an a priori fact of just thinking like me personally, like I thought about it and I was like, I feel like death would kind of violate my rights, so I'm gonna go join a contract real quick.
Cool. Fiat. What's the violation?
Yeah, so you have to imagine this comparative world, and either one, if by defending the status quo, that means you defend all plea bargaining in the current status quo, which you don't. You defend solely fictional pleas. So you have fiated other forms of plea bargaining out, so you can look at this comparative world.
When have we done that?
That's how comparative world works. In order to get to the comparative world, you must do the point. Every util case use comparative worlds. Imagining a world in which plea bargaining is fictional is a use of comparative worlds.
Tell me where in my AFF have I read comparative
Your entire
worlds?
AFF, your plan. A fictional plea is just, and then you look at a world where only fictional pleas exist.
Where do I look at the world? I'm describing the status quo. I'm jumping.
You're not defining this. No, you then
it says
continue to say fictional
pleas
pleas solve.
Yeah, they happen.
Yeah, how do they solve without fiat? Like, explain that.
Because they avoid deportation. Cool. But okay, subsets.
Oh yeah, so they avoid deportation. So with fiating
why...
that happens. Great.
Okay, subsets. Why is the resolution an abstract mass noun?
Why is the resolution an abstract noun? Let's go to the card. So it's just that considering moral sentences, because it's a moral sentence, that's what it is. Also, we have like a generic.
Where do we
masculine-
get readings from? Where do we get grammatical readings from? Do we get them from specifically like definitions that are written out loud, or do we do it when we read it out loud?
I have no idea what the question is asking. I read the definition out loud. Is that what you want to hear? Like,
Okay, bro. Drop the debate or why?
to do future abuse, and if I prove substance has already been skewed, if I prove theory of use, that means substance has already been skewed, and also it is the AFF shouldn't have been read in the first place. If you go for a drop the argument push, that's just labeled AFF.
No RBIs, baiting theory. Why is baiting theory bad?
Because I do not want all my rounds to be me, a theory debater not disclosing, then I read disclosure, and they drop the entire doc on me for 4 minutes.
But is it not a true shell?
Is it not a true shell? Skill gap matters.
So
Like, a novice is not going to win disclosure versus a 4-year theory debater.
Let's go illogical for being fair. What is that supposed to mean when I've won a straight turn to your norm?
It actually doesn't function as a straight term because I guess I'll be in the 2-R when you go for that.
How is competing?
You're just testing my model realistically and not running a straight term.
Does the judge have an obligation to set good norms?
Does the judge have an obligation to set good norms?
Yeah.
They should have an obligation to uphold norms. So if the competing interp is just testing the interp, then there's no reason to vote for it. Cool. I'm gonna go refill my water real quick.
I'll send the doc. It's gonna be the same doc name, but the T cards are at the top. You got it? You got it?
I'm good.
Alright. Order's gonna be the advantage, framing, no fiat, subsets, yeah. The contract stuff is gonna be on half framing page.
Oh, okay. I'm good.
Advantage, framing, fiat, T.
So,
Yeah.
Advantage framing plus contracts T subset. Okay, I'm good.
Everyone good? Collateral consequences ensure conviction for large crimes that cause mass violence, mental trauma, torture, abuse, spills over families, fictional police solves, prosecutors make lesser fake charges which deters deportation. It's happening now, which means that it actually doesn't take out the AFF because it's a systemic analysis of the status quo and not a predictive action of what will happen if we eliminate it, which we'll go on to the framing page now. We're going for no intent for as a distinction. That's a hijack to contract. They don't have intention, thus consequences are the intention specifically for states. We only defend government rule util, i.e. if they pass the bill that led to mass genocide, that was the intention of the bill and the intention of the government. Proving that how governments are a collusive state of agents that don't have a unified intention, which means that deportation outweighs under contracts, freedom is infringed. That means that util outweighs under contracts and deportation because intent is intrinsic to the action and intrinsic to the contracts and governments. We'll do induction fails here. It's the only thing we have to win. Can't foresee is wrong because states can use reasonable extent and calculate accordingly because they have better tech. That was the doubting Miller evidence. Induction from the past is wrong. Probability solves. The AFF's analysis of status quo, so it doesn't matter in the first place. Intent stemming is wrong. We only foresee a reasonable consequence which solves, and governments only foresee a reasonable amount of consequence which solves. Non is specifically wrong. It's about how induction is hard, not impossible, which is better for states that are improving. Doubting Miller, but they also have better tech crossball. All the answer why the government can calculate. Now onto the offense. We'll do contracts offense here. On the transparency warrant, plea bargaining operates within the laws that are public, which means the requirement for universalizable maxims because the options of plea bargaining is public, independently of publicity standards about political authority, not forcing every single person to be public, and jury trials are worse. They don't need to disclose the individual decision, and coercion's consequential. It's the prosecutors that cause something bad. Plea bargaining is often under contracts because Brady versus U.S. proves it's a legal contract, and Young is conceded on case. It expands defendant freedom. They choose to take the plea bargaining, and coercion is only because of the material implication. The contract looks to inherency in a vacuum, the action in the vacuum. Now, fiat. We don't imagine a world with just fictional plea bargaining. We imagine this world, the status quo, and look at only fictional plea bargaining. We don't take a stance on any other forms of plea bargaining, which means that we don't fiat in action or implicitly fiat in action, which means that they have to delineate what the AFF does, and nowhere in the AFF to say we fiat. Now onto T subsets. 1. We evaluate the plan text in a vacuum, otherwise unpredictable violence for instruction text. Rec team learning education 2. Counter-interpretation. Subset affirm. In means within. The words or phrase evidence. Contextual to countries. Where case 9. Int is not required to be completely inside of. And if that's harder, the space minorities affirm regardless of proportion. There all evidence is no intent to exclude or define. Lastly, at all 9. Now generic is true even though only minority action plus possess a relevant property. Materials carry malaria. Strike is true even though very few actually carry malaria. Generic readings don't rule. Existential reasoning. Almost Tahari 24. Even sentences that favor generic reading can elicit existential interpretation. T is a floor, not a ceiling for efficiently grounding the resolution, then debatability outweighs 3. After ground their model is purely efficiency versus mass incarceration, ensuring stale base. 4. Missing burdens are definitions are solvency deficits, not topical limits that ruins debate. 5. Functional limits critiques are universal philosophical velocity categorical and the quality solvency advocates are hard. 5. And 6. Bad D, small d is inevitable. Otherwise, that always encourages the AFF. 1. No theory. Generics are functional limits. 7. Reasonability. D will determine teams of subset are inevitable. Then substance crowd is the only impact back. Argument to make intervention inevitable is determine newness disclosure solves. An advantage linked to the same DAs and yes RBIs. Good shells wins. I want to straight tell your norm, which proves that's most logical. Even if you think that's logical, there's no impact to a logic. We'll go on. PMP affirms. If anything in the 1 in C has triggered PMP, it affirms because specifically the AFF and NEG has an obligation because justice is a binary, i.e. the affirmative must prove that the resolution is just, but the negative must prove that the resolution is unjust because there's no A just, which means the only thing that matters is our Sheaff evidence, which affirming is harder, which is used as a tiebreaker, i.e. the 7460 times Q, and every single empirical analysis proves that affirming is harder, which proves that the AFF is harder, and we get PMP, presumption, and permissibility collapse to presumption because we both have obligation, and obligation to collapse to presumption. It doesn't matter. Yes, more on contracts. Young is specific, or we'll go on more into contracts. Contracts are motivated by pain and pleasure, which proves because I want to enter a contract because I'm motivated by pain and pleasure, even if it's contingent and different. But person and deportation always under contracts because it infringes on contracts on.
Sorry, it's 40 clicks. We're there. Starting to prep now.
order is going to be T fiat, then subsets, contracts and framing, and the AC will all be meshed together on the same page. So wherever you load their contract stuff, just stay there.
Fiat, subsets, everything else.
Yep.
Alright.
Is anybody not ready? First, we'll justify our paradigm issues. No RBIs. It's illogical. I need to win a violation in order to win, which means your competing interp is only a true norm because it needs to prove abuse. I need to violate it to prove your rule is good. There's no reason as to why I should lose if your competing interp only proves a test of the interpretation. It's purely defensive. It just proves that my interp is not the best model debate. It doesn't prove their interp is the best. But even if their interp is the best, they're setting a new rule. You wouldn't vote me down for a rule I haven't violated yet. That makes no sense. Also, they didn't respond to baiting, which means it's at 100 and chilling is at 100. Because they didn't respond to it, baiting is obviously not good. It proves that good theory debaters do. A skill gap exists that was conceded and crossed and never brought up in the 1 arrow to a response to it, which means they lose no RBIs. They can't win on RBIs at all in this round. Also, chilling, it immediately proves that theory debate will never be able to live, which means we'll never be able to check abuse. Infinite abuse is infinitely worse than anything they could read. Even their logical argument wouldn't matter if I can never win a debate round because the infinite abuse debates boil down to the worst form of debate, which we don't want now. On reasonability. Reasonability is bad. They didn't even give you a bright line and they didn't prove why they were reasonable, which means you can't affirm on reasonability because there's no reason as to why. If they say the bright line is good, they need to provide a bright line. Second of all, judge intervention is not inevitable. They didn't provide a warrant, but also judge biases should not be in the debate, and there's infinite variables in debate, so we shouldn't predict for things that we don't know actually if they don't actually exist. And also, even if that exists, we should still minimize it. There's no reason as to why we should not focus on minimizing judge intervention, even if it does exist. And also, competing interest creates the best race to the top, which means that a race to the top is infinitely better than a race to a bright line that we don't even know to the bottom. Now, on drop the debater, it's conceded. We have dropped the debater to determine future abuse. Even if they went for a drop the argument push, it doesn't matter. It takes out the entire AFF fiat plus the entire AFF. Now, we'll go for the shell. First of all, interpretation: the affirmative must defend the resolving in the United States criminal justice system. Plea bargaining is just as value to clarify no AFF fiat. That's the extension of the interpretation. Now the violation will justify. First of all, the we meet is incoherent. They need to imagine a world. They didn't even respond to any of our comparative worlds analysis. The fact that they must have now they're saying they're literally going to the status quo, looking at all of plea bargaining, then picking a specific thing and going, this is it. That requires them to fiat a comparative world in which fictional pleas exist. Second of all, solvency claims function as fiat. The only way to get to a solvency claim is to fiat a world in which you can solve. That is their argumentation of solvency would prove that there is fiat. There's no other way to prove solvency absent fiat because you need to fiat that an actual action happens to solve anything. Their solvency claim is a justification of the violation. The we meet is bad. It says that it doesn't respond to anything and it just says that there's no line in the app, but the entire app uses fiat. The solvency claim uses fiat. Cross-text proved that there was a form of fiat. I said the entire plan text is a form of fiat because it looks at it. This specific nitpicking, going to a comparative world and then reading an advantage specifically on this comparative world and then reading a solvency claim is a form of fiat. You need fiat to go to comparative worlds. It's conceded through every speech. The violation is there. It's strong. Now, we'll extend limits. This predictability, lacks of consensus on one consensus on top of F means there are functionally an infinite amount of apps that can marginally related to plea bargaining. B, bidirectionally, their model green lights defending either the status quo or plea bargaining reform, which means the neg has to defend both sides of the debate. That creates impossible preference and makes the getting impossible. They have made my job in this round impossible. I cannot win anymore because they have not provided. They've used fiat. Because of this goes conceded. The limits response is conceded. They didn't do any work on it. They just went for the we meet. The we meet was incoherent. Now, on subsets, it's no RBIs. You can't vote on it. We've already proven as to why. It's just a test of our interp. It just doesn't actually prove why they've won their model. No RBIs is illogical and should remain illogical. No new AFF responses debating or chilling. They're at 100, which means even if you believe that it is logical, it's infinitely worse for infinite abuse to exist than for them to maybe be a bit behind on a logical argument. Next, on contracts. First of all, the hijack is incoherent. We've proven it. Governments aren't actors, which means they can't do pain and pleasure arguments. Second of all, we proved that governments don't care about other people. This was in the 1 and C that we said that governments, there's nothing stopping me from there's nothing that makes me care about other people's pain or pleasure. Nothing makes the government not kill me because it makes them happy. There's no reason as to why they don't trigger permissibility in this round, which means they don't get access to intent, foresight, distinction, or no active omission because the government is not an actor. That was in the ASPEC warrant. That proves that the government's not an actor. You can't say that they intend or foresee things because they physically can't. But also, predictability takes it out. Monado 5. Jealous say predictions are hard, but this also is a reason why predictability shouldn't be ethics. Ethics must be 100% certain. That is Joyce 21. They try to make a universal claim where utilitarianism is the one thing we should care about. Because of this, if it's not certain, why should you care about it? If you have no reason to care about it, that's permissibility. But They've conceded Joyce 21 and Pignon, which both take out Util. Util makes a moral judgment, which means it's a moral belief. There's no reason as to why it's true. Also, Pignon proves the open questions argument. There's no reason as to why Util can work in this round because it doesn't solve anything. Even if they go for the hijack and say we take over contracts, it doesn't matter because they're utilitarian applying to contracts completely makes contracts also trigger skep. If contracts uses util, that requires skepticism because that requires predictions, that requires naturalism, that requires experience. Don't let them sever themselves out of naturalism. Joyce 21 is non-cognitivism. It is a justification for moral anti-realism, and we've conceded defense on contracts. So even if they do try to go for the hijack, they double turned and just got rid of contracts in all. Also, on there's another reason why you're going to presumption too, because if they prove constitutionality or rate of the United States, congrats, it's constitutional. It's not a reason to affirm. It is not offense under contract. Offense under contract is proving that it creates new contracts that are valid or it continues new contracts, which it doesn't. Also, now, we'll go on to why we're winning presumption of permissibility. They mishandled all of our warrants of presumption of permissibility. Their warrant of Shaw is incoherent, and we already proved that it kills debate because you over-adjust and you don't know how to vote. Their Shaw is not a tiebreaker because their argumentation that they solve stuff doesn't work. We've already proved how it's unverifiable too. You think more things are false than true. They say that that unjust exists and A just doesn't. First of all, there's no Carter definition of that, but two, they haven't actually provided a reason as to why permissible is not another reason under just. It does exist. We've proven it because we can prove the resolution false by proving it's not just. They have a burden. My burden is to rejoin the AFF. That was 80% of my warrants on why it comes. Also, negation theory. We responded to it. My burden is to prove the AFF is not true. Also, if permissibility happens, that is a way of proving the AFF false. That is a way of proving that justice does not happen, which means we're winning the permissibility warrant and the presumption warrants because our presumption warrants go conceded that they need a form of offense to even win justice. If they don't have offense, they can't win justice. They can't meet their burden. There is no Shaw evidence.
Did you extend subsets?
No, RV, I didn't.
Sure.
Order.
We'll go. The advantage. We'll do the advantage. We'll go to no fiat. Then we'll go down to the framing page. Alright, are we all good? You all good? Collateral consequences are convicted for a large crime that causes mass violence, mental trauma, torture, abuse that spills over to families, fictional police solve. In the status quo, prosecutors make lesser fake charges with deterrence deportation. They can see that induction doesn't take out the AFF because the AFF is a systemic analysis of the status quo, which means that we're not predicting, we're rather announcing what is happening in the status quo, which means that it flows through is the only offense in this round because they have not extended a single war-wide contract to negate. Now, fiat. Extend the we meet, we don't fiat. Look at our AFF conjunction. It's descriptive of the status quo, and our plan text specifically says is, which means that we do not fiat. There's no comparative world because solvency is different from what Faisal thinks it is. We're saying that fictional please solve deportation, not that it erases everything in the world completely. Not look, nitpicking is not a reason why it's no fiat, but rather why it's a fact. Let's say I have a room full of people and I single out Ishan is just because Ishan solves for cheating by doing something like looking at people's computers. Is not the same as saying that everyone in this room just automatically does not exist because we're looking specifically at the status quo. We do not take a stance on other terms of the plea bargain, but it's not mean that we erase it completely. The we meet just flows through. Even if you're voting on sort of limits or drop the debater, it doesn't matter if we haven't violated the shell. Framing. First, we'll do the governments don't care about other people. They concede that governments don't have intentions, which means they don't have the intent to harm other people, but rather only care about the citizens because they only have an obligation to help their own citizens, i.e. a contract, or sort of these states have an obligation to only aid its citizens. That was the Enoch evidence, which conceded and extended coming out of the 1 ER, but conceded also in the 2 ER, which means it flows through. But they conceded two things and two main routes to the ballot. Either A, you're voting off intent for set distinction, which means it's a risk of offense, or you're voting B on permissibility. Everything will to be done after we've extended intent for set distinction. But every single reason why the 2 ER triggers permissibility is the reason why it affirms. We'll get to that later, but doing no time for side distinction here. States do not have intent, which means that whatever the consequence of the bill they pass, whatever the consequence of the action is, that is the intent. I.e., if they pass a bill that causes mass genocide, that is the reason why that is their intent in the first place, which is proven by how they're a collusive body with no unified intent. I.e., even if they're made up like individual actors, they cannot unify their intent only by voting and passing bills. Can they do that? Which proves that there is intent for distinction. Deportation is the only offense that is happening in this round, or it's the only offense that's happening in this round, which means that even if you think that there's some triggers permissibility, it's risk of offense of solving util. If util is 1% risk of truth, then it outweighs because nothing in this round else matters because the 2 has not extended a single piece of offense. But we'll do the permissibility work here. George Nigger's permissibility, cool. The 2 has given you so many reasons why it triggers presumption of permissibility, but we'll win it. Shaw is not a tiebreaker. We'll do it here. They can see that affirming is empirically harder, which we'll do the tiebreaker work later. But falsity exists. It's wrong because they can see that it's a binary, i.e. that plea bargaining is just or unjust. There's no a just or permissible just, which proves that it's a binary and falsity exists for plea bargaining is unjust too. It's a triple is wrong because the binary takes it out. Triple only applies to morality, i.e. moral, amoral, and immoral, but the just is just the binary. We do the affirming harder later because both sides cannot prove an obligation that collapsed to presumption because who did the better debating? That would be the affirmative because 52% of bid rounds from our Shaw evidence tells you that negating has won, which proves that affirming is empirically harder because the NEG gets generics. The AFF speaks in the dark. They get the AFF 30 minutes before the round, but the NEG does. We do not know the NC, which means that they always up layer and moot the AFF, which proves that if nothing happens in this round and there's no offense in this round, like the permissibility, then it triggers presumption, which affirms.
Well.